What if the Berlin Wall had never been built? Have you ever thought about how different the world might be if one of history's most enduring symbols of division had never existed? Imagine a bustling Berlin of the 1960s. No concrete border slicing through the city, no families torn apart, no Cold War icon looming over the world like a grim sentinel. What if the Berlin Wall had never been built? How would Berlin, Germany, and even the entire globe look today? Let's explore this fascinating alternate history together. And by the end, we want to know your thoughts because history is always better when it starts a debate. And hey, if you enjoy eye-opening dives into alternate histories, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us explore these moments that make us question how remarkable and unpredictable history truly is. To understand our what-if scenario, let's rewind to the early 1960s. World War II's aftermath left Berlin divided into 4 occupation zones split between the Allies, the United States, the Soviet Union, the UK, and France. Soon, tensions between the capitalist West and the communist East turned these zones into microcosms of the brewing Cold War. West Berlin became a bright, buzzing hub of democracy and economic opportunity, while East Berlin and East Germany, the GDR, remained rigidly under Soviet control. But here's the problem. Millions of East Germans, over 3 million to be exact, fled to the West in search of better opportunities between 1949 and 1961. This migration bled East Germany's talented workforce dry, crippling its economy and threatening the very foundations of the GDR. Soviet-backed East Germany had no choice but to act. So, on August 13, 1961, construction of the Berlin Wall began, which immediately severed the free flow of people and ideas, and altered Berlin forever. But what if this divisive wall had never gone up? Could East Germany have held itself together? What would have happened to the Cold War, and how would Berlin have emerged in a world with open borders? Let's start in the 1960s, right as the Berlin Wall should have gone up. Without the wall, Berliners in East and West could have continued crossing freely, commuting to jobs, mingling with friends and relatives, or even building a new life elsewhere. The loss to East Germany's population would have likely been even greater, millions more leaving for the opportunities of the West. But what next? Could this have led to the total collapse of East Germany within just a few years? The East's economy, already struggling to support its citizens, would have deteriorated much faster as its workforce drained away. Without the wall to slow the exodus, would the East German government have been forced to adopt reforms to survive, perhaps loosening its Soviet-style grip on the people? Interestingly, keeping open borders could have made Berlin a more volatile hotspot in the early Cold War. After all, if migration had kept rising sharply, both sides might have faced mounting tensions over how to manage this dynamic city. Could this have forced a confrontation between the US and the USSR sooner? Or could Berlin's free movement have helped foster a unique, but fragile, neutral space in the midst of Cold War propaganda and politics? Stepping beyond Berlin, let's talk about the broader Cold War. The Berlin Wall was not only real, it was symbolic. Its construction reinforced East and West as 2 opposing worlds, a visual reminder of democracy versus communism. But without the wall, would this global ideological standoff have softened? One scenario suggests that global tensions might have worsened. If Berlin had remained open, the Soviet Union might have sought more drastic measures to impose its control over East Germany. The absence of the wall might have magnified Berlin, not as a divided city, but as an explosive trigger for the Cold War. On the other hand, an open Berlin might have eased Cold War hostility on some level. Open borders could facilitate cultural exchange and foster understanding between ordinary citizens of East and West. Could this have hastened the end of the Cold War? Could the Iron Curtain have worn down faster without the harsh barrier symbolized by the wall? Fast forward a few decades. How might Germany's reunification in 1990 have played out in a world without the Berlin Wall? Would it have come earlier? Would it have even mattered, with Germany never fully divided in the first place? In a wall-less world, perhaps Berlin could have become a powerful example of coexistence, its people moving freely across politically distinct zones, blending cultures, and building something uniquely inclusive. This might have accelerated Germany's economic growth, particularly because a unified Berlin would never lose the potential of East Berlin's infrastructure or labor force to decades of stagnation. But let's not ignore the challenges. If East Germany had collapsed under the weight of its failures earlier, or without a buffer, would the reunification process have become more chaotic? Would it have involved harsher tensions between the capitalist West and the collapsing communist bloc? Alternatively, would a freer East Germany have had time to evolve on its own, potentially converging with the West more smoothly? Wherever Germany ended up, one thing is certain. Without the Berlin Wall, many of the historical scars Berliners carry today, the painful separation of families, the haunting surveillance of East Germany's Stasi, the long physical marker of division, might not exist. Let's jump now to the present day. Berlin today is a city of transformation, resilience, and creativity, but so much of its identity is tied to its divided past. As visitors walk along trails of the Berlin Wall and stand at iconic landmarks like Checkpoint Charlie, they reflect on how far the city has come. Would this sense of emerging from division hold the same meaning in an alternate timeline? In a world without the wall, Berlin might look different, perhaps more prosperous with earlier growth and global influence. But would it still carry its deeply human story of rebuilding and reunification? Without its stark history of division, would Berlin be the magnetic cultural hub that draws innovators, writers, and artists, all inspired by its complex past? Perhaps in this alternate world, Berlin might resemble just another thriving European capital, missing that edge of emotional depth woven through its layers today. Finally, would Germany's place in the world, its role as a case study in resilience and growth, shift without that dramatic chapter in its history? So, in a world without the Berlin Wall, Berliners could have moved freely, East Germany might have collapsed sooner, or potentially reformed, and the entire Cold War could have gone in a radically different direction. But we all know that history is never this simple. Remove a keystone moment like the Berlin Wall, and you might reshape the entire fabric of the 20th century. And now it's over to you. How do you think history would have changed if the Berlin Wall had never been built? Would the Cold War tensions have cooled, or would the lack of a barrier have triggered even more conflict? Would Berlin be better off today, or would it have lost the character it forged through struggle and reunification? We can't wait to hear your opinions in the comments below. Before you go, if you loved exploring this alternate history, hit that subscribe button and join us for more dives into the moments that shaped and could have reshaped our world. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious about history,